Question and answer number 1. Jeff J. Brown. First, I would like to thank John Potash, who inspired me to contact you. And in the interim, I have interviewed Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. Comrade Mumia, friends, fans, and followers around the world are always seeking courage to stand up to global capitalism, oligarchic control of the world's non-communist, non-socialist peoples, and the tyranny and genocide of Western Empire. They are hesitant to step outside the oppressive conformity of the matrix. They really get inspired hearing stories of others who have taken these steps along their arc of awareness towards freedom of conscience and liberation of the soul. Some learn sooner than others. I didn't get it until 2010 when I was 56 and having moved back to China for the second time. You were 6 days older than me. Better late than never. Now, thanks to reading John Potash's 2 outstanding books and doing hundreds of hours of reading and research, my arc has been raised to another critical level in learning about the Black Panther Party, its unexpected nexus with Comrade Mao Zedong, and other great international heroes of socialism and solidarity. Comrade Mumia, please share with us your arc of awareness growing up in the United States as a black man and what inspired you to fight for social and economic justice for the 99%. Your encouragement is invaluable to those who are hesitating to join the cause.
When I think of the 60s, I remember times of vast movements across many communities for national independence, for freedom, for self-determination, against state repression, and against imperialist wars like Vietnam. This period, in retrospect, was one of convergence of many social movements, coming together with a broad, deep vision of another country, one tied not to slavery and oppression, but to a liberating vision that ignited a generation, or seemed to. The system used all of its tentacles to pull people apart, chiefly racism, and muddy that vision to one of cool acquiescence. Remember that movie, The Big Chill? Such times as these are visionary eras, when and where people look over the walls of their prisons for a brief glance at freedom, the freedom offered by possibility. Because Fred Hampton not only had this vision and acted to craft it into being, he was killed in his bed by the state to darken the eyes of a generation. Movements are made by collectives of people who have hope for social transformation, or, as anthropologist Margaret Mead said, here I paraphrase, never doubt that a small group can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. To grow up in such a time was truly remarkable and a wonderful thing.
Question and answer number 2. Jeff, these days Black Lives Matter, BLM, a non-governmental organization, NGO, is splashed all over the global mainstream media and has broad popular support. However, it's not all such a rosy revolutionary picture. Soon after forming, it took $100 million in donations via the Ford Foundation and affiliate NGOs. Just recently, the George Soros foundations have pumped $220 million into black justice groups, as well as Antifa and many others. These are astronomical sums of money. It is widely known that Ford Foundation and left-wing philanthropists are largely fronts for the CIA and deep state, hiding behind their liberal image. This strongly suggests that BLM, Antifa, and their ancillary groups are being used as managed opposition to satisfy the ambitions of our oligarchic 1% and are likely fully infiltrated by agents and fifth columnists. Occupy Wall Street was another prime example of this happening. What to do? If you were handed the BLM movement, What would you do to try to right the ship? Was MOVE, M-O-V-E, infiltrated? I've read the Black Panthers also had, and I assume still fight the same problem. What recommendations do you have for anti-imperial, anti-capitalist people who want to organize and take their movement to the next level without becoming managed opposition?
2. As I contemplated your last question, I remembered a book I read several years ago entitled "The Revolution Will Not Be Funded." It illustrated how the right used its excess capital to build and sustain think tanks which intellectually supported the system of capitalism. The wealth of the left had no correlate, for its excess capital went to social services, but not the erection of ideological structures. The authors essentially instructed activists to not get caught in these webs of the wealthy. But when you think about it, doesn't it make sense? Why should it surprise us that the system perpetuates the system? Who expects capitalism to build revolutionary structures that are inherently anti-capitalist? BLM is not the BPP, except in the mind of Rudy Giuliani, perhaps. The BPP was nominally politically independent because its newspaper funded its operations. When poor black people organize, the wealthy seek to control and moderate it. When that doesn't work, it unleashes its hitmen to extinguish such movements. Hence the ferocity of the attacks on groups like the BPP and MOVE. It unleashes its corporate media to demonize those who resist the forces of exploitation. Remember this. American revolutionaries were invariably rich guys who fought to preserve a system of slavery, captive labor. George Washington was one of the richest men in the colonies, owning hundreds of people and vast tracts of land. Thomas Jefferson also owned hundreds of black captives, but had the decency to write that 1 hour of slavery's misery was worse than ages of British rule over America that sparked revolution. Oppressive systems continue to buy off people so that those systems can continue to function. There's an old saying, he who takes the king's coin dances to his tune. If BLM were mine, I'd institute an intense study of history to show how systems try to defang popular movements. I develop an independent economic stream to support organizational frameworks, and I teach COINTELPRO's efforts to destabilize social change movements. That said, BLM are smart, informed young folks who may not want nor need anything from an old head like me. That's because youth movements must be youth movements. That is their essence. That is who they were born to be.
Question and answer number 3. Jeff, Dear Mumia, history seems to repeat itself across our pale blue dot. In 1962 to 1964, the leaders of the African National Congress, ANC, in the Republic of South Africa were rounded up. They were convicted for their political activities and beliefs, including Nelson Mandela. The apartheid government wanted to put them to death, but international pressure forced them into sentencing them to prison for life. Apartheid eventually fell due to years of internal and global pressure, as well as economic sanctions. Starting in 1985, these freedom fighters began to be released from incarceration, with Mandela being the last in 1990. In 1966, the Black Panther Party was founded. In 1972, MOVE, M-O-V-E, was founded in your hometown of Philadelphia, also becoming a primary target of the CIA, FBI genocidal war on all black liberation movements. In 1978, 9 MOVE members were rounded up and sent to prison for life for their political activities and beliefs. You actively supported MOVE, and in 1981-82 also became a political prisoner and given the death penalty, which was later commuted to life. Starting in 2018, the MOVE 9, as they were called, who were still alive behind bars, began to be released from prison, with the last one set free in February 2020. You were still in prison for life and trying to get out. Question: how do you compare the AFC's liberation movement and Nelson Mandela's cause to eventually be released from political prison to that of the Black Panther Party, MOVE, and your efforts to gain your freedom?
I found your historical analysis interesting, but of course history may be similar but rarely exact. That's because the struggles of black people are different when we consider nationalism and so-called citizenship rights, for example. The ANC fought for a majority-rule state. Black Americans tend to struggle for rights within the U.S. empire, rarely rights to a national homeland, such as the Republic of New Africa or the original Nation of Islam, for example. That said, both movements struggled for black dignity and self-determination against the racist state power. That, to my view, is a significant degree of difference. Plus, ANC had to surrender some of its key positions to grasp state power, as is often the case when two sides begin to negotiate. The BPP wanted to establish a revolutionary anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist government over a new nation. MOVE wanted to be free of what they called external government, so it could live in a state of natural freedom, free also from corporate influence and control. So the world seems a little complex, eh?
Question and answer number 4. Jeff, this was in the alternative media today, which you might find interesting. The title of the article is, "Get the F***K out. Watch Chicago residents confront BLM protesters in tense standoff." Here's the article. Residents of Chicago's Inglewood community angrily accosted a group of Black Lives Matter protesters who showed up to demonstrate at a police station where hostilities between locals and activists nearly boiled over into a brawl. A BLM protest march from Inglewood to Chicago's 7th District Police Station on Tuesday ended in a showdown with community members, at times devolving into shouting matches as locals insisted the demonstrators were giving their neighborhood a bad name. "If you ain't from Inglewood, get the F***K out of here," longtime South Side resident Daryl Smith was heard shouting at the protesters, who he said were not from the community. They were going to come to Inglewood antagonizing our police, and then when they go back home to the north side in Indiana, our police are bitter and they're beating up our little black boys, Smith told reporters on the scene, adding that we don't need any outsiders coming and antagonizing. A photojournalist from the Chicago Sun-Times, Tyler LaRiviere, tweeted some of the march's more tense moments, including when a heated argument nearly escalated into a physical confrontation. Tweet: "From earlier, Daryl Smith, an Inglewood resident of 51 years and community activist, tells reporters why he doesn't want protesters in his neighborhood." Tweet: "Tensions between community members are growing. Community activists aren't tolerating these folks here." Tweet: "Community members continue to ask protesters to leave and ask, 'Where are you when a baby's shot?'" Tweet: "Some community members and protesters are getting into arguments here at the 7th District Police Station. Many community members are demanding that these protesters leave their community and protest somewhere else. An organizer of the protest, which was put together by members of Black Lives Matter and advocacy group Good Kids Mad City, told a local news outlet that some demonstrators decided to leave following conflict with residents, saying they felt unsafe. Other organizers maintained they were from the local area, but said they decided not to participate in the rally due to agitators. The protest came days after the police shooting of a 20-year-old suspect who reportedly opened fire on officers, which kicked off a spree of looting in downtown Chicago over the weekend. Smith said the unrest had been unfairly blamed on Inglewood and that the protesters were only feeding that perception. A lot of people aren't saying the looting downtown sparked from Inglewood. A lot of people are saying the looting downtown sparked from Inglewood. We're not having that. It didn't come from Inglewood, he said. Those looters are opportunists, and we're tired of Inglewood getting a black eye for any and everything that happens. Some 400 officers were deployed to the downtown shopping district to quell the looting on Sunday, making over 100 arrests aimed at what Mayor Lori Lightfoot dubbed an assault on the city. What do you think, Mumia?
Dear Brother Jeff, I hope you're well. The Mao, Fidel, and B.I. Lenin questions actually haven't come to mind, but I was intrigued by the Chicago get the fuck out story and somewhat saddened by it as well. That's because it reflects not just the low level consciousness among Black Chicagoans, but the high level of oppression that they have and are suffering from. Essentially, what Inglewood old heads are saying is, you're going to get us in trouble if you tell the truth about what they, meaning the police, are doing to us. It has all the path of what might have been heard on a slave plantation when a Harriet Tubman came, or when John Brown tried to raise the sufferers to freedom. It ain't an indictment of BLM, but a real statement about how oppressed people are living in U.S. freedom in Black American ghettos. It's truly sad, but telling.
Question and answer number 5. Jeff, if someone asks me what are the 3 favorite books that I've written, it's not a hard question since I've only published 4. You, however, have been a fairly prolific author with 10 books published by my count. I'm going to have to ask you to brag on yourself a little here so friends, fans, and followers of China Rising Radio Sinoland can learn more about you and your mission. Question number 1. What are your 3 favorites amongst your body of work? 2. Please briefly describe each one. 3. Then tell us what you like about each one and why it's a good choice for us to read. And the list of written works is number 1, Have Black Lives Ever Mattered? Number 2, Writing on the Wall, Selected Prison Writings of Mumia Abu-Jamal. Book number 3, The Classroom and the Cell, Conversations on Black Life in America. Book number 4, Jailhouse Lawyers, Prisoners Defending Prisoners. Number 5, We Want Freedom, A Life in the Black Panther Party. Book number 6, Faith of Our Fathers, an examination of the spiritual life of African and African American people. Number 7, All Things Censored, 7 Stories. Number 8, Death Blossoms, Reflections from a Prisoner of Conscience. Number 9, Life from Death Row. And number 10, Mumia Speaks. In Revolutionary Solidarity, Jeff.
You know, when I get a question like this about my faves, I recall a conversation I had years ago with the sci-fi award-winning writer Terry Bisson. He said, It's like asking a father to say who is his favorite child. It's impossible. That's my answer, Jeff. I dig all the works I've ever written because they spoke for the time they were written. Plus, it really doesn't matter what my fave is. It matters to the readers, for they really decide this question. That's my answer, man.
Question and answer number 6. Jeff, dear Comrade Mumia, I loved your answer to question 5. As they say in the sport of fencing, touché. We've got a good set of Q&A. Here is a final one. Over the last 4 months, we've spent time getting to know each other as revolutionary friends and comrades. You know, I lived and worked in China for 16 years. What would you like to ask me about this amazing nation, its people, 5,000-year civilization, and communist socialist revolution to close out this interview? Sino best, Jeff.
Flip the script, huh? Actually, I would. For 16 years is a considerable amount of time to dwell in a place, specifically a foreign nation. I wonder, based on that long 5,000-year history of Chinese civilization that you mentioned, what are the continuities that you see that have survived the 1929 revolution?
Jeff's answer. This is really an excellent question, Mumia, because Mao Zedong worked really hard to create a, quote, new China, end of quote, to be people-powered by, quote, new Chinese, end of quote, not the ones and their leaders who let Western and Japanese imperialists rape, plunder, and ply them with illegal drugs from 1839 to 1949, which is known as China's century of humiliation. For sure, Mao succeeded beyond anyone's imagination at these two goals. If he hadn't, China would have already been suborned to Western oligarchic capitalism, only to be turned into a continent-sized, balkanized resource whore like Indonesia or an occupied narco state like Colombia. I always say that half the Chinese like Deng Xiaoping's market-oriented reforms and opening up, the urbanites, the rural folks less so, but 95% of them agree with Mao's geopolitical worldview. That is, imperialism, colonialism, and global capitalism are the enemy of China and its communism and socialism. For this reason, the Chinese are some of the most aware and savvy people about history and current events. That being said, Mao could not undo 5 millennia of continuous civilization. Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism are a very powerful and influential guiding force in the mentality, spirituality, and daily conduct of the people, and always were after 1949, even when the official and public focus was on the revolution. While Mao's quote, Little Red Book, end of quote, is among the most sold titles in history, the Chinese people continued to and still love their ancient literature, poetry, paintings, calligraphy, sculpture, dance, acrobatics, opera, music, and their version of vaudeville. From the very start in 2012, President Xi Jinping's administration began to synthesize this vast cultural and historical repository with the Communist Party of China as the vanguard party. This was to protect the people from Western sabotage of their highly successful socialism with Chinese characteristics and communist way of life, thus making it possible for the nation to prosper, develop, and progress in its own interests, not those of Euranglo land. It all comes full circle. This is similar to the Black Panthers establishing their vanguard party to protect and empower the people to provide for themselves and prosper, while drawing on global and national black cultural and historical reserves to help maintain the spirit of solidarity. That's the end of our audio interview.